So a couple months ago, I happened across this somewhat obscure little indie game called Dungeons of Blood and Dream. Thought it looked kind of interesting, added it to my wish list, and then bought it off the Steam Spring Sale. I would then proceed to get hopelessly addicted to this game, and over the course of the next several days, spend about 20 or so hours wringing every last drop of content I possibly could out of it, netting 100% completion and all the Steam achievements in the process. When I wasn't playing the game, I was thinking about it, so needless to say, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Though I will preface this video by saying that Blood and Dream is one of those games where the less you know about it going in, the more fun it'll be, so while I'm not going to be spoiling any major secrets here, I still recommend playing this blind if it looks like your kind of game. So I'm just tossing up a spoiler warning right here, because I'm going to be discussing a lot of the mechanics in depth, and obviously there'll be visual spoilers too, so continue at your own risk, as spoiling this game for yourself may result in unintended side effects such as vomiting, hair loss, fingernail loss, bone disintegration, instant transportation to the realm of Briaculon the Pain Entity, death, fatigue, or generally negative feelings. Okay, I assume everyone who cared is long gone by now, so let's get started. Dungeons of Blood and Dream is kind of a weird one to explain. It's a roguelite, but most of the appeal, at least in my opinion, comes from the secrets. The game itself is good on its own, but what kept me coming back was the hunt for a variety of endings, as well as the completionism aspect. Like I said earlier, it took me about 20-ish hours to see everything the game had to offer, and during that time, the game never got stale. There's a couple things contributing to that. For one, you've got a bit of knowledge-gated progression here. For instance, the primary puzzle of the game has you trying to piece together a name letter by letter from sometimes cryptic hints dropped by the bosses. Alongside that, meta-progression makes its presence felt, which admittedly can be hit or miss, to say the least, though I personally don't mind it when it's done correctly, and here, it's done correctly. You collect these things called dream spheres that you can use to level your damage, health, etc. But the thing is, you aren't completely useless with no upgrades, thus avoiding that feeling of, man, let's fucking go, dude, just a few more runs and then I'll be able to start actually playing the game. Though by the end of it all, you do kind of just wipe the floor with everything. Still, if you're planning on breaking the game to the point of filling the entire screen with one attack, that's not really the way Blood and Dream works. The combat is usually done through melee, fencing specifically, and oh boy, attempting to explain this is going to be fun. The first of this game's notably unique and creative mechanics. Your attacks change depending on whether you're moving left or right. You've got a cut and a thrust, so 4 different attacks total, and you can chain them together if you want to get real fancy with it. Weapon choice matters too. Using a rapier will obviously benefit the thrust attack. Likewise, sabers and their ilk are cutting weapons. If all this sounds horrendously complicated, it's really not that bad. Internalizing it all will happen naturally after a couple runs. The harder part is adjusting to the pace of combat, which is much faster than one would expect from this style of game, and also trying to learn some of these enemies' attack patterns, like fuck the gnomes, alright? Fucking hate the gnomes! Also sending all the worst wishes to these unsavory motherfuckers who run away from you and leave damaging slime puddles in their vile wake. Back to the point, the combat, like many things in Blood and Dream, can feel noticeably jank at first. Some might be put off enough to even call it bad in their first hours, but again, it's just a matter of learning the pace. How far away from enemies you should stand, using your weapons efficiently. All things considered, I think the combat is actually pretty solid once your first few runs settle into muscle memory. The end of floor boss fights are solid as well, giving you some switch-ups from the normal enemy design and forcing you to think on your feet. That being said, you can kinda just completely humiliate them after a bit, so that challenge doesn't last long. Oh right, I should probably address the HUD, yeah? The thing you've likely been staring at the whole time and pondering just which inmate at Arkham Asylum designed it. Honestly, it becomes pretty invisible. I don't even notice it anymore, but I do have some potential explanations for why it looks like that. I have my suspicions that this game might be loosely inspired by Cruelty Squad. They don't really play much like one another, but Blood and Dream was made on the same engine. Some of the visuals have a similar vibe, albeit much less abstract in this case, and most relevant to the sake of this conversation, both games have huge, intrusive, but admittedly cool-looking borders around the screen. Could be a reference to that, not sure. Otherwise, it may also be a tribute to old-school CRPGs from the 80s and 90s. For example, here's Ultima Underworld. The actual game window only taking up so much screen real estate was pretty common back in the day for RPGs, and maybe it's just me, but I felt like Blood and Dream was definitely channeling that era. Underworld 2 especially, with how trippy some of those later stages were. Speaking of which, everyone seems to think this game is really weird, but like, I kinda don't see it, honestly. I don't know, man, maybe I've just been taking too many indie game pills, but from where I'm sitting, it doesn't seem all that unusual. In any case, the HUD serves its own gameplay purpose aside from just looking good. Here's your health, here's your map, here's your money, and on this bar here, these little spirit dudes, who I like to call the backseat boys. They'll chime in from time to time, giving their opinions on the stuff you find. They also seem to like arguing and messing with you, so it's just like having your very own stream chat at all times. And then there's Frog Lips over here, who thinks I don't know what a fucking door looks like, though I suppose this is more of a portcullis. So let's talk about the gameplay loop. Enter a room, kill enemies, they drop gold that you can spend at shops, and hearts for regenerating your health. Simple enough, but there are a couple additional interesting mechanics at work here that play into the progression of a run. Potions and rings. On the topic of potions, they're a random drop from enemies and will give you a variety of buffs or detriments depending on the ingredients. As for which ingredient does what, you'll be doing a lot of experimenting because it isn't always consistent between runs. A speed potion, for example, might be a completely different concoction on your second run from what it was on your first. Once you play enough though, you'll start to get an idea for what does what. Though I wouldn't recommend thinking too hard about how some of these taste because, yeah, this is the only game I know of that lets you drink a piss potion. Besides Noita, but I think the fact that I can name 2 games that feature piss potions is kind of just my own burden to bear at this point. Anyway, rings! Power rings! These are cool. When you find a ring, you actually have to decide which finger to put it on, with the same rings giving different effects depending on where you put them. One might seem completely useless, but end up being absurdly powerful on a different finger. And the game keeps track of what effects you've discovered between runs, so you don't have to memorize it. That is much appreciated. Thank you for that. But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen something like this in a game before. If you have, let me know, but in my experience, this is completely unique. Just such a weird and awesome idea. I love the creativity here. Oh, and there's this thing called a finger altar that you can choose to sacrifice one of your fingers to for the rest of the run in return for a high-level item. Decision making, dude. Decision making. Just like the decisions that were made in the soundtrack. I'm sorry. As I mentioned earlier, old CRPGs seem to play a pretty big role in solidifying Blood and Dream's vibe, and nowhere is that more apparent than the music. This is some pure dungeon synth. And if you're not familiar with dungeon synth, that's a rabbit hole well worth delving into. But I enjoy this soundtrack. It can be a bit simplistic occasionally, but I don't mean that as an insult. If anything, it adds to the charm. Regardless, this music is whimsical, adventurous, and fits like a glove to the visuals of each respective level and boss. Take a listen. The rest of the audio, sound effects and such is also quite serviceable. Not anything exceptional exactly, but it all gets the job done. I do want to shout out the potion drinking sound though. It's just really satisfying for some reason. But I've delayed long enough, and now I've got to mention what I consider to be the coolest feature in the entire game. Something that I genuinely cannot believe isn't made use of in more games. Press N. Brings up this notebook. Okay, pretty neat. You keep your own notes. Makes sense for a game with puzzles. Click and drag to draw with blood. Drips go down the page. Cool. Awesome. But why can't you type on here? You seriously have to draw every word? Yes, because blood mirrors. Look into one and you'll see a combination of runes. Use those runes to cast a spell. But here's the good part. The spells are consistent between runs, which means you have to go into your notebook and draw the symbols to keep the spell there for later. And the notebook isn't wiped between runs either, so you accrue spells over time and literally make your own spell book. How freaking awesome is that? Like, what? I know this might seem like a tiny thing to some people, but man, I was so excited when I saw that. One of my favorite things a video game can do is let me make discoveries on my own. So a mechanic like this, I am so on board for. Sure, you could just look up the spells. If you're lame, yeah, have fun on Google while I'm over here scrawling in my tome of blood magic, you peon! You ignorant knave! You know nothing of my power! Lay thine wretched and undeserving eyes upon my glorious minion!
Yes, slay them.
Slay them all! Hey, whoa, that got out of hand fast. But not to worry, I've taken my medicine completely of my own volition, and I'm feeling much better now. Enough, at least, to start wrapping this review up, because this game being as secret heavy as it is, I don't have a ton more to cover here that wouldn't spoil something. And believe me, I am just foaming at the mouth trying not to get into those, because really, they're the best parts of the entire game. But regardless, I hope I was able to, at the very least, convince you that this is a pretty cool experience. Again, I highly recommend playing it and sinking into the world yourself, because calling Dungeons of Blood and Dream underrated is an understatement. At the time of writing this, it's sitting at barely over 700 Steam reviews, which, to be clear, is not an insignificant amount. That's still more than a lot of games get, so 700 is reasonably successful, all things considered, but it's just that I think it could have so much more. Genuinely, I believe that all it would take for this game to get a sizable audience is one super popular YouTube video or something. Not that I'm saying I think this will be that video, because I don't. My goal here is only to spread the word a bit. But I feel like if a few things fell into place, this could be a hit with the more niche indie game community. At the very least, I know I liked it. And at the end of the day, that's what this channel is all about. Sharing cool stuff with you a lot and potentially showing people something they would like too. So yeah, as always, I hope you're all doing well, and thanks very much for watching. Have a good one.